Thanks, guys, for allowing me to be part of your night here, talking about anywhere, anytime learning. Interesting concept. I was just thinking of something I heard on the radio before, and someone was using their pencil to rewind a cassette, as we used to do with cassettes, and you can rewind it back and tighten it before putting it into the car so it doesn't get jammed and all that. And I was thinking, my sons and daughters have are now reasonably self-sufficient. The youngest is 19, and they're all living at home. They've got jobs and working. Except that I saw this one over here saying, was it listening? No, they still don't listen. But and I was thinking, even they probably don't remember or don't even know rewinding cassettes with the pencil. Which is quite interesting. I thought of another one today. I thought negative. Someone was talking in the car and about, it's one of those morning shows and their mum keeps on bringing up a photo and every time they take it away it seems to reappear, and someone says, oh, they probably still got the negatives. And I thought, I imagine if I said that to the kids, oh, we can use negatives, and you get that again, oh, what's a negative? And all those sort of things apply, doesn't it, in terms of, going to the video shop and you can't get the video because it's out, you've got to come back next week. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. People streaming video now on Stan and Netflix and all those sort of things, and Apple TV. And it's quite a different world, or not being able to use a phone because it's engaged because you're using the internet. Kids would have no idea of what that means and what that was. And even my youngest, who's 19, asked me recently. He said, "Dad," and like yourselves, paid a lot of money to go to a Lutheran school, right? Dad, how do you send a letter again? And this is 19. She was obviously has to pay something. Where do you get stamps from? That's what the question. Where do you get stamps from? I'm saying, go to the post office. Oh, where do you get the post office again? So thinking, the world is changing quite rapidly, and I guess it's probably a little bit different to when we were at school in some ways, except we all want the same things for our children, like our parents wanted for us. I guess in saying that, lots of things have changed, and we can now do lots of things which we couldn't in the past. And my role is Director of Innovation and Technology across Lutheran Education. And that involves helping teachers use technology and work in contemporary practices in learning and teaching in schools. And one of the questions I ask myself with any sort of innovation, or we could actually refer to it as a fad, whether it be technology, whether it be a new type of reading program, whatever, does this actually improve learning? And improve learning provide opportunities for our children and our students and our care in ways which otherwise we could not provide. I think that's really important. Because a lot of the schools that I visit around Australia and within our system and also outside of our Lutheran system as well, and spend a lot of money on resources. And technology is probably one of the largest bits of expenditure. Would that be right, David? And it's one of the largest ones, probably after wages and all those other things. But technology usually tunes to a lot of pressure on the budget. Even today, with parents purchasing devices in schools, and that sort of changing around the place in different ways in different schools, there's still a lot of investment in technology in the school to keep those devices running with Wi-Fi and internet connectivity and all those other things, and software and apps and things like that. So that's changed quite a lot, and one of the questions we asked before there's a big implementation in technology as a school is, how is this going to make a difference to learning? And is it going to provide opportunities for the learners in ways which otherwise couldn't be achieved? Otherwise, what's the point? That's what I ask myself. Sometimes I say to myself, what's the point if we're going to implement something somewhere and it's not going to make a difference, a real difference to learning, which couldn't be done normally, then we might as well be spending the money on volleyballs or other gear that the school needs. So that's the premise we come from. And we're able to provide opportunities these days in learning which we couldn't before. Prime example is the ash cloud that's happening over in Bali at the moment. And when classes are talking about well, what is this ash cloud and why is it stopping planes and why is it stopping planes here in Australia? And I remember being in a group with a group of schools here in Brisbane, and they were looking at together. It was a coming together of lots of learners and doing lots of research and activities. And they were looking at the ash cloud in Iceland, if you remember that, when that first happened. And that really caused a lot of disruptions around the world, and the kids were researching it. Now, how would we research that, or a number of us? And, you know, I know I'm older than probably a lot of you here. And then, you know, I would research it probably by going down to the local newsagent on the weekend and trying to get one of those project cards. If we remember those project cards that used to be the newsagent. But I doubt I'd find one on ash clouds, but you never know. But you could find projects on anything. Or trying to open up the World Book Encyclopedia that Mum and Dad had or whatever and look up ash clouds. I don't know what would be in there. I haven't looked up the World Book for a long time. So, and trying to get information that way. Maybe look in the newspapers, I'm not sure. And do research. Very different these days. And a group of students that I was working with in a group of schools, they were able to, at that point in time, talk about what an ash cloud was and why does it disrupt air activity and how is it causing this disruption around the world. But they thought, let's do a bit of research, and they typed an ash cloud into the internet. And what usually comes up when you type in a current disaster or phenomena in the world in Google, well, up comes all the news services like CNN and ABC America and all those other ones, BBC, etc. And kids and ourselves sometimes take that as being, you know, reasonably gospel. That's true. You know, CNN's reporting it, must be true. You know, ABC's reporting it, must be true. But they were able to look at discrepancies about descriptions about the ash cloud and all that, and they couldn't actually make sense of it. So part of the journey with them during that activity was to say, well, what should we be aiming for? And after a few questions, they came up with, well, it would be great to get to the source of the information. What's the source of information? It would be great to talk to someone nicer, wouldn't it? So we call that getting to the primary source of information. So that's one of our key drivers when working with students with searching on the internet, and with adults as well. Now, it's about getting to as close as possible to the primary source of information. And that's what we aim for. And we can do that these days. Anyway, to cut a long story short, because I'm losing my time here. By morning tea, those groups of students had done some research, and they learned one thing. They learned how to find out the suffix for Iceland, because we know AU is Australia. And you know, take a guess, what's Iceland? You know, IC, you don't know. Anyway, you can look it up in this special database, and it's IS. So anyway, they typed in ash cloud, and they typed in site colon, the word site, S-I-T-E, colon, IS. It means bring all the results back about ash cloud, but only bring them back if they're Icelandic sources. Okay, so you're narrowing it down to those news services. So within 20 seconds of learning that, it comes back. They then spent some time, looking at the news services from Iceland, which was giving really consistent information and very different to ABC and BBC and CNN, etc. So they then had to narrow down, and by morning tea, they had emailed 5 correspondents and journalists over there from 5 of the news services from Iceland. And by morning tea, 3 of them had emailed back. And so they actually made contact. And to cut a long story short, by lunchtime, they were in a live Skype link with one of those correspondents and journalists on the ground in Iceland. So, what do you think? How do you think they were behaving before lunchtime when they knew they were going to be in a live video link? It wasn't about how to use the technology. It was about, oh my goodness, what questions are we going to ask them? And that was powerful. That's what the learning we really wanted them to actually be engaged with. We wanted to raise their level of concern, higher order thinking skills to think about, okay, what's some really critical questions we need to ask as journalists to help us with finding answers about what's happening in the world in terms of science. That's something we could never do at school. That episode would be so hard to do. We couldn't get to the primary source of information that easily. But today with the internet, with things like Skype then, with the ability to research, with good teacher input to say this is how to research effectively to get to the primary source of information, what are we looking for? Now let's build the critical questions. And that was the hard bit, but just before lunchtime when they were saying, what questions do we ask them? And kids were arguing and discussing and saying, how do we get to this? And what can we say to them? And how can we ask them with respect what's happening in that? And it was really good. It was a wonderful, wonderful journey. But we can do those sort of things these days which we couldn't before, and that's what technology allows us to do. Similarly, anywhere, anytime learning is another way of saying, because we have technology, we have online tools, we have the internet, we have mobile devices, whether it be an iPad or a laptop or, you know, the phone. Who would have ever dreamt that you'd be carrying, I mean, 15 years ago, I would never have dreamt that I'd be carrying, you know, something, a powerful computer in my pocket that I can do live video with. I was just actually having a live video link just there with our Director of Education in Helsinki, because he was asking me a question about something. We can do all those things quite easily. We take that for granted now, but boy, imagine what's going to happen when your sons or daughters, they're 10. They're 10. So by the time they're 22 or 23, what's the world going to look like with the impact of information technology? If we couldn't guess this 12 or 15 years ago, what's going to happen, you know, when they're 22, 23 in their first few jobs or finishing university or whatever? It's quite amazing. So anywhere, anytime learning is about mobile devices, portable devices. We now have that in the world. We can actually take that connectivity with us. It's about having mobility in terms of environments and the way you work. Because here at Bethany, they don't only work in the classroom, they work out in the yard, they work at home. You have the ability to continue working. And the internet brings also the ability to tap into resources which are very rich in media. Very, very rich in media. And now that we have all those things starting to happen, it allows us to learn differently. It allows students to be able to tap into richer resources, sometimes better than the resources that the school can provide. Okay, to be able to see, you know, to be able to have a live Skype with someone, to be able to see a video that's rich in terms of media and being able to explain something is really, really important. And so what is flipped learning? Well, flipped learning is a part of anywhere, anytime learning. And sometimes we use this in saying BYOD. Have we heard of BYOD? Bring your own device? Well, schools, I don't know, Bethany's using less of the term BYOD. Because what does BYOD mean? It's actually come from industry. BYOD means bring your own device. But it really doesn't say much about learning, does it? You know, you can bring your own device, doesn't mean you're going to learn. Okay, but when we say it's anywhere, anytime learning, that starts to mean something. It means that it's got something to do with, we're not just about learning in a physical space here. We're about learning at home. There's other ways of learning too, and it's connecting outside and beyond the boundaries of this school, which we did to a certain extent when we were at school, but we didn't have the luxury of some of these resources. So, what is flipped learning as a portion of anywhere, anytime? Well, if you can think back prior to 1400, think back to prior to 1400 before the printing press, okay? Schools then were about the teacher reading the scripts, the handwritten scripts, to the students, okay? So you never had printed books then, okay? And that's what happened, so you did that in the classroom. They read to the students. But that changed, didn't it? Because that then changed in a way that when the printing press came about in the 14th and 15th century, and books were starting to be printing, then over the next few hundred years, you had the ability for people in general, as well as people who are learners, to be able to have those books. And they could use that technology not just at school or listen to someone, they could take it home. So that in itself was a flip. And therefore, in the spaces where they got together in so-called schools or learning areas, they got together and they were able to do higher order things. They were able to discuss what was in the book, rather than spend those 6 hours at school reading the book. Okay? So then, you know, we then had the luxury as learners during our schooling to be able to have textbooks and be able to read at home. And sometimes we're asked to go home and do some pre-reading. We're asked sometimes to go home and do pre-reading before tomorrow. And in tomorrow we're going to discuss it. Or tomorrow we're going to apply it. So we sometimes have pre-reading. That's been around for a long time. And a lot of schools are changing the word homework to home learning. Because it means a lot more these days to engage and learn. You know, a lot of the homework that we were used to was solely about revising what we did that day. Okay? And sometimes we had teachers that gave us some work to read before the following day or following week or our next class, depending on we're in primary or secondary school. So flipped learning is about flipping that. And so if you have a look at this little definition here, you can see that, sorry, it's green, I'll read it out. Flips the common instructional approach with access to online technologies created by the teacher or educational organisations. Instruction which used to be in class can be delivered in more rich ways at home in advance of class. It frees up class time for harder work, including greater collaboration, group work, problem solving and higher order thinking. So if there's a procedure or an introductory piece of work that the teacher's going to present, and let's think traditionally. Now, none of our schools work in a traditional way. We're contemporary schools. We need to work with the ways that the new syllabus dictates in Australia, etc. But let's just, for sake, take a traditional way where the teacher stands up front and just delivers. And I'm sure we've experienced that either at school or at university or whatever it may be. And they deliver, okay? And what traditionally happens then? Some students are listening, some students are following on the board, some students with individual needs that need to go over that again might have a chance to ask the teacher maybe one more time. There might be a group that's already got it. There might be a group of students then, and then let's have some practice. And then you can work, and then some students still may not get it, etc. like that. Okay, so that happens, that's a traditional classroom. Now that part of delivering, when you deliver, or if we want to call it a lecture or instruction, then sometimes that can be delivered offline, or off-site, but online via the internet. So imagine, just imagine if the teacher was able to record themselves doing exactly that, so that the student could watch, not just once, but if they wanted to, could watch 20 times again at home, and rewind and play it back. Okay? That's one very small aspect of flip. Now why would you do that? Well, you could do that in such a way that says, okay, I'm going to deliver this before I was normally going to give the lesson, and get the students to watch it before next Wednesday, before this Wednesday. When they come in on Wednesday, I'm actually, because we're teachers and we have magic to be able to decide who has actually watched it and who hasn't, with a few schools, and how well they watched it. If we can say fairly well, with a few questionings and other strategies, whether they've all watched it, it gives us the chance to actually just move that next step. That next step might actually be discussion. It could be a hands-on activity to do with that we're now going to move to. You might say, why would you want to do that? Well, you can see what we've saved here. We've saved a bit of time, haven't we? So flipped learning has come about because of the time constraints in education across the world. Make no bones about it, there are time constraints. So if that student now has time to move on to the next section of that learning, what is actually happening now is that what's starting to happen in class is what they would sometimes be given to do at home. Now I'm talking about extension work, assignment work, project work. And if you think back to our schooling, why were we given some of the hardest tasks, project work and assignment work, to do away from the teacher and away from the other learners at home, and then annoy mum and dad and say, how do I do this? I've got this project to do on ash clouds and the World Book doesn't have anything. And why would we be given that to do outside of school when the masterful learners, the teachers and the environment to support that harder learning, that extension learning, could be done at school? And the reason why that was happening in past education models is because there's limited time. We have to get the instruction done, and you just have to do the assignments and projects at home. Okay? So the flip comes about now because you have the ability with technology these days to deliver some of that instructional content via technology and via the internet during that time when there probably would have been some homework in the traditional sense, and now it becomes home learning. And at school, then the teacher starts to creep a bit more extra time to work on the higher order extension work with those students, as well as with the students who are struggling. Now, we have this occur in a number of our schools, and I had some examples here to show you tonight. And we've had primary schools and secondary schools engage in this model. And a lot of the parent feedback and student feedback has been very positive. And also teacher feedback. I've got a couple of teachers who are in some of our Gold Coast schools who keep giving me feedback, which, you know, I found really hard to believe at the start. You know, one of their feedback is that it's changed her life. I'm going, how could flipped learning change her life? Or I now have 2 hours of extra time. I'll take a secondary teacher, a year 9 teacher. I now have 2 hours of extra time with my year 9 English class every week. I said, how do you get 2 hours of extra time? And she worked that flip model now to allow her to work with individual students and small groups of students, because they're all partaking in that sort of instructional lecture type stuff at home. When we interview the students, some of them have said, we much prefer watching Mrs. Such and Such or Mr. Such and Such sitting at home and playing it back 5 or 6 times than we do in class when she's doing that, because we really love that she actually sits down and works with us individually and has much more time to do that during class. So we're starting to flip the model. A lot of the research is saying that this is extremely supportive for students at all different levels and enhances learning. I guess that's saying that research shows that active learning improves students' understanding and retention of information and can be very effective. It's saying now that we have more time at school, we've created more time at school through flipped learning to actually work in the project-based arena and developing higher order cognitive thinking skills. And that's what we're all on about in terms of preparing our students for the future. The essence of the flipped classroom is the shift from the passive to the active learning, where the learning process is more visible, reflexive, collaborative, and engages students in critical thinking. So there's some of the things that we expected students to do away from school at home, which is very hard and very difficult. So we're bringing the harder learning into the school environment, the easier learning away from the school environment. And that's probably a very simplistic view that I've presented there of flipped learning. But we've always had this, and we've probably experienced ourselves in school. And if I can give you a couple of examples here, I'll just take this example. There, this is interesting. That. So these group of students were a group of Year 6 students at Grace Primary, and they were. This is an example of how they flip the learning. What they're doing right there, it actually shows a few other things too, but what they're doing right there is they're doing that science experiment where you have salt, sugar, chalk. It must be chalk. Must be something else. Anyway, got three crushed powders there, and you've got cold water, warm water, hot water, and you're actually looking at saturation, dissolving in different solutes in different liquids and seeing how much you can add. Then they're graphing it, and then they're going to cool it down and see what works and how it works. And it's a science experiment. But they didn't know that they were really doing all that you can see that they were doing there. Prior to that lesson, they were using a few different. So I know I'm not on the board there. I'll just put that back on. They were using a piece of software which is in a repository from the Australian government called Schoodle that supports all our schools. It's $180 million worth of software. and it's been grown over the last 10 years to support learners from kindergarten to year 11 with extra software. And you could think some of them are sort of game orientated, but to teach concepts which otherwise would be difficult to teach. E.g., place value, for example, and I'm an ex-maths teacher, so this is dear to my heart. But when you have tenths and hundredths and units and tens and hundreds, for us that's easy, but that's actually a very difficult concept to teach from early years upwards. Place value properly is a really hard concept to teach. And we all remember what it was like probably when we first started to subtract numbers and add numbers and the tens and carry them. And that carrying thing really didn't make sense, did it? And there's new ways of getting kids to understand place value. So on here there's some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things that you can pick and say, if my child's having problems with just in the tens thing, let's say it's a beautiful game you can play where you've got to hit the numbers and you win points, but it really teaches kids really well. And lots of research. Anyway, there's $180 million worth of this, and you all have access to this via the school. So there's $180 million worth of this beautiful software in there that's available. Now, what the teacher did in that group before was they actually told them to go home and use this one. And I'm trying to remember how to use it now. And this was a little experiment where they can add different solutes to liquids and then see how much and they can graph it, etc. like that. So I think I chose potassium nitrate or something, or salt just before. So I'm going to add 5 grams. Just put 5 grams. Did 5 grams go in? Yeah. Sorry, I'm in front of it. I'm going to add 20 grams. And, I better get the stirrer and just stir that for a sec. And you can see I've got 30-degree water. I've only left it at 30 degrees. And you can see then there's no excess left when I stirred it, so it means I can probably add some more. So I'm going to add a little bit more, etc. Oh, come on. I'm going to have a cheat here. I'll better give it a stir. Okay, add some more. Excess 9 grams now. Okay, so there's 9 grams of salt left, and I can't dissolve any more at 30 degrees. I'm going to record this data over the left here. So at temperature 30, the mass of potassium nitrate of salt is 46. Okay, so the student then knows that. Then you change the temperature, you add more, you can graph it again. You then start to guess, how much you can add. You then pick you pick something else. You might pick sugar and pick sugar and do that. You can change the temperature. So they were doing this the night before because those few little screens that I just quickly jumped through before told you what this game actually did. Okay, so they did that. They came in the next day and you saw those photos when they came in and had the room set up with the actual prac. Now normally we would take a lesson or so to actually go through this, just in theory, but this does it so well because it's animated and all that sort of stuff. They came in, they knew exactly what they had to do, which was wonderful. And we had all these other things set up. They went through it really well, and we were also getting them to use technology better, etc. like that. The funny thing happened and we never planned for that time, one of the students, because if you keep adding sugar, say, to water and you keep to, say, 60-degree water, you might add 8 teaspoons of sugar and you can't dissolve it anymore, so they graph that. What they learnt on this during the night before, we hadn't planned to teach. What they learnt there, which we forgot that this did, was it teaches them if that glass of 8 teaspoons of sugar starts to cool down, where does the sugar go then? And it turns into crystals, and that's called crystallization, or it's a super saturated solution, and all that. Anyway, we finished it. I was working with some, I went and visited these teachers, and I was loving getting involved with it all. And then the students just said, and we thought we came to the end of the prac. They came to the end of the prac, and they said, we said, what are you guys doing? And they said, no, we want to make a super saturated solution and get the crystals to come out. I'm going, we didn't really know about that. We didn't okay, let's do it. Because they'd learnt that from the night before when they went through this. So it was a funny little thing that came out as well. But what it was trying to show was that we actually did that, which normally takes a whole lesson, they did that the night before using this tool. They came in ready to engage. Okay, the teacher at the time, or two teachers at the time, were able to tell which students hadn't done that, and we were lucky that most had at that time. There was a couple that didn't, and she dealt with it by getting them to go through it then, and you have all that too. That's all part of teacher management. But that typified how we were able then to get into the prac and discuss it more. What they then did was, they then did the prac, and then they had some other questions that they had to participate in groups and collaborate and then come up with other ideas to do with the prac. So they started a journey in higher order thinking. There were some tougher questions that they had to tackle. And so some of that simple prior knowledge was handled with that. Now that's not a video. Okay, so flipped learning is not about video, but it's about where you have the, usually it's technology that allows us to provide something like this at home away from the school so they come ready to engage. Does that sort of make sense what the flipped learning actually does? That's where the flip bit happens. There's wonderful, wonderful stories. And the last one I'll show is this one. I love this one. This is a teacher, I've got his name there, Miranda McGee, who's a secondary school teacher in one of our schools. And she chose, her year 9 and her year 11 English class, she chose to deliver instructional content via the web or video or whatever, and they do that offline. They come to class and she gets to work with them in groups. Now here's an example, I think, of a year 11 class where one of the goals was that they had to read lots of editorials. And so what she would normally do, she'd get up, she'd use a data projector or the internet and come up with an editorial. And she'd say, now this is the structure of the editorials that we find in newspaper. Notice they have no new information here, this is the introduction. Notice they talk about the framework, notice new introductions here, notice what the editors do, just stand and talk about that. And she might do that 3 or 4 times, because the goal is that they're going to actually write their own editorial. So what she did was, she started to just record herself, and using the iPad or using the computer, there's some groovy little programs which the teacher takes probably, there's a couple of programs that take no more than 5 minutes to learn. The hardest bit is sitting in a room by yourself and talking to yourself. You sometimes start again because it's not a normal thing to do. So there's a program called Show Me or Microsoft Community Clips. And what Miranda did was she actually, those introductory editorial ones where she stands at the board and talks about these examples, she just recorded herself doing it. They're not fancy. They're not a $1 million production. She just did it in a few minutes, and this is one of her first ones, and it's an editorial on marijuana and in a newspaper. And so this is just a simple little. Have we got sound on?
Yeah.
Oh. I won't hold on. So what she would do is she would just create these little quick snapshot videos that she would normally do, but she's using software. Instead of standing at the board and getting a video camera, she's just using software that records what she's doing on the screen. She then sends that out to her students via email, or teachers will send it out via email, and they watch, and she tells the students which one to read. She did something slightly different. She just got a Twitter feed for those people that use Twitter, and her 90 students followed that Twitter feed there. So what she would do, not only put up videos or works or links that they have to watch at home, but if she saw something as she was reading the paper online or something that's going to be useful, she'd just drop it straight in there. And she would have a little code if it was sort of like optional. They didn't have to look at it, but she would just call the shots on that. She was wonderful, and she's one of the teachers that said it's changed her life. She got 2 hours of extra time with her classes every week to do independent extension work. The students improved in results dramatically. The parents the feedback from the parents was the higher motivation of the kids, because the kids were actually sitting, because all they heard from the kids' rooms was Miranda all the time, talking to them or whatever on videos. The students that were struggling loved it because they were able to play back. You know, going through and that process of what an editorial is, if you're struggling with that concept, the student can just play it back or rewind to the part they didn't understand in their own presence without feeling embarrassed with other students. They can play it back a few more times at home. So all those things came out. The other thing that came out too was, for her as a secondary teacher, during testing time, there's a lot of pressure on marking tests, helping students who have forgotten the work with work while you're trying to do all that. So they're lining up at your office door as you try, as you know, 2 minutes before the exam or 1 day before the exam for the prepare, and asking you for that work. She found that that didn't happen because they had a record of a lot of this work online that they could immediately go to and revise before tests and assessment and things like that. So there's those added benefits as well. So there's some examples of flipped learning that has been about. It's not too different to some of those contemporary teachers that we might have engaged with at school, but it's more formalised now because research has been done on it to show the benefits in terms of learning. And now, today's society and the way the workforce is changing, the way what's required in terms of innovation and creativity across the world, there's a big call for co-working, higher order thinking, problem solving, etc., which we now need to actually concentrate on a lot more than we have in the past with our learners and students and your sons and daughters. Any questions? Yeah.
What sort of time investment at night is this for this sort of age group?
Yeah. Yeah.
Variation.
But it varies between school, but it should not be more than what they would be expected to do with the traditional homework. Because it's not meant to, and it's a good question that gets asked, are we actually stealing time from their home time to get that extra time? And it's not. It's what was normally expected of them in doing that homework. Because sometimes, it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes homework is for homework's sake. You know, and sometimes, you know, providing the traditional homework was just so that they were disciplined in having set times to doing some work at night. So what this now allows to do, sometimes that higher order questions that were asked for them in the homework is actually done now in class the following day, and this shouldn't be taking up any more time than what they would normally spend on their homework.
This will be in lieu of the other one.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
When
And
I was a
look,
kid, you
and
did
it's not black and white too, and not everything can be done, not every instructional piece can be done in this flipped format, and not every assignment is going to be done, or type of assignment is going to be done at school. It's still going to, that's still going to flow, but it's going to change. It's going to change so that access to the masterful learners, which I give the name to teachers as master learners because everyone's learning, you're going to have greater access to, the kids are going to have greater access to the teachers when they are doing that extension work and assignment work. And when they're doing that instructional work, there's going to be a lot more rich content, like some of the stuff I've shown, that's going to be available that they can access at home or anywhere away from the school, or even access it at school as well, because that's all available now. Some of the early years parents that I've talked to at other schools, they've actually liked the fact that they now have access. I talked about school before, $180 million worth of content. A lot of early years parents love it because they now have this suite of products that they have access to when the teacher sends home, and sometimes it's either revision or sometimes it's flipped in terms of numbers and place value. So the parents have got a set of tools to work with their sons and daughters as well. So it's a good thing all around. And particularly if you've heard of things like Khan Academy. Khan Academy is used by adults, university students, primary students, secondary students. You know, if a student's having troubles with fractions, you could go to school and find a beautiful thing there. Or Khan Academy has wonderful, wonderful videos that are made really, really well by other learners around the world, and they're vetted and all that. And a lot of parents like that too, because if I had a even I'm an ex-maths teacher. If one of my kids came home and said, "Oh, I need help with these binomial expressions and all that," I mean, I'd probably, can you do that again? And do that again. But when they come home with a lot of access to other experts besides their teacher and videos, etc., then the parent can actually quickly revise and learn that as well, which is of benefit too. Being able to discuss the work too, which is great. Any other questions in relation to